Hi. It's an honor to be here with all you extraordinary women. And thank you, Chantel, for stewarding this incredible event and for inviting me to speak again this year. Although, truthfully, I would rather be almost anywhere than up here right now. Stage fright doesn't quite capture what I experience every time I give a talk or share my truth with the world. The fear and trembling, the high pitches and difficulty breathing aren't just symptoms of a phobia or social anxiety or an overstimulated sympathetic nervous system. They're also symptoms of a woman unleashing her soul's voice publicly. As emerging women, we're often taught to publicly voice our persona, our expertise, and if we've succumbed to the mainstream media or marketing mindset, our shtick. Therefore, most of us have consciously or unconsciously suppressed and dishonored our unique soul voice in some way, shape, or form in order to fit in, to be admired, to be successful. I certainly have. Throughout my life, I've compared my voice to the voices our culture celebrates. The voices brimming with confidence, sparkling with spiritual charisma, and pumping with professional pizzazz. By these comparisons, my voice has always failed me and those around me. In fact, after every talk I give or group I facilitate, I receive a handful of offers from well-meaning coaches, vocal trainers, self-help motivators, and people pushing things like EFT, NLP, time-tested techniques, beta blockers, mantras, and if all else fails, vodka. They all say something like this. You're saying important things, Sera. It would be so much more powerful, well-received, better for your career, easier for you to get on Oprah if your voice matched your message. The upsetting part isn't just the feeling of failure their honest reflections sometimes trigger. It's that most of these suggestions come from other women. Women who have forgotten what soul can sound like unleashing through a female body. Women who are therefore unable to recognize that the most important part of my message is my shaky, struggling voice. In other words, women who have forgotten a vital teaching and transmission of the divine feminine. Now I can say this because, as mentioned, and as you will soon hear in more detail, I was a woman who had forgotten too, and still does at times. Honoring what it takes for me to unleash my soul's voice publicly is something I have to practice on a regular basis, like right now. It's my hope that sharing some of my story today will remind and encourage you to embrace and unleash your own soul voice, no matter what it sounds like, not just for your own liberation, but for the liberation of every woman on this planet. While my fear of unleashing my soul's voice publicly has ancient roots, I remember my first day at a new school when I was 10 years old. Surrounded by all those unfamiliar faces, it suddenly felt close to impossible to voice my inner reality. So my mouth clamped shut and stayed shut in most classrooms. In fact, when I got to graduate school, concerned professors used to ask me to read out loud from a book we were assigned, something a teacher might ask a student to do in grammar school, just so my voice would be heard at least once in the classroom that semester. Now, in social settings outside the classroom, I said the right thing to fit in, and I chatted up a storm with my close girlfriends. But my inability to voice what was most meaningful to me, especially in more specialized settings, felt frustrating, embarrassing, and profoundly painful. Like I was failing at something indescribably essential. Like I was failing at being myself. Interestingly, it was during graduate school that I first heard and unleashed my soul's voice privately. Late one night, after another disappointingly silent day in the classroom, I closed an academic text and opened a new red journal I'd recently received from my sister as a birthday gift. Yet the blank white pages only seemed to amplify my absent voice. With a heavy heart, I asked, where is my real voice? Unexpectedly and almost imperceptibly, words arose from somewhere deep inside me, and I quickly scribbled them down onto a page. Come closer, closer still, till closer has meaning no longer. I turned the page, and another phrase came out of my body. Your voice is a treasure. Don't bury it. Share it. I turned the next page and smiled when I heard, every time you speak your truth, a goddess tattoos your name across her belly. There is nothing like hearing your soul speak for the first time. Everything false fades away, and everything true comes into focus. You remember, oh yeah, this is me. Aware of it or not, you have this voice within you as well, although your voice probably sounds quite different than mine. Your soul's voice isn't exactly a voice from the divine. It's how the divine communicates through and as your funky female self. You mix and match together. Therefore, your soul might not sound mystically poetic. She might speak some sort of spiritual street slang, gangsta goddess. She might swear like a sailor or sing like a whale. She might sound like a woman giving birth. She might shake like the wings of a butterfly coming out of a cocoon. She might skip like a child who hasn't lost the wonder of life. She might roar like a mama bear at what's being done to this earth. She might giggle like a drunk angel telling very dirty jokes, or shimmer like a rainbow, or erupt like a volcano, or seduce like a sacred siren, or caress like an awkward new lover, or strike like lightning against injustice, or stammer like a heretical truth that's been buried under 2,000 years of lies, or cut through the matrix like a knife of pure knowing, or squeak and squirm like a woman on stage experiencing all her fears and trembling boldness. This is how she speaks. These aren't the only ways the feminine soul speaks, but this is a voice many of us have shut up because we have not been taught to value it. We've been schooled, trained, and lured out of it. That's why creating the space to hear and express our soul's voice privately is one of our most potent practices. While every soul voice is unique and changes like the weather, they all share similar qualities like integrity, authenticity, creativity, love, and freedom. You'll know when your soul is speaking, because even if your mind thinks you're talking too crazy or too common, your body will feel an actual physical release. It's not so much about the words, it's about the source they're coming from. While expressing your soul's voice might seem odd at first, it should still feel natural. It should feel good, like you're scratching an itch you've had since before you were born. Unleashing my soul's voice in that red journal saved my life in graduate school and became the inspiration for my first book, The Red Book. However, when I entered the professional realm, I stifled my soul's voice, almost immediately and almost unconsciously. Partly because unleashing my soul's voice publicly still filled me with extreme fear, and partly because I wanted to succeed in the mainstream spiritual and self-help arena. An arena that tends to favor predictability over mystery, 7 steps over downward spirals, straight and clean over curvy and messy, and sales over soul. I almost didn't notice or care that not one soul phrase from my original red journal made it into my published red book. To prepare for the release of the red book, I went to a renowned media trainer in LA. She started our session by asking me why I thought it was so important for young women to ignite their divine sparks. 15 minutes later, I finished answering her question. The media trainer looked like she had been hit with a fleet of fire trucks. After a quick shake of her spinning head, she did what she does best. She condensed my 15-minute spiritually nuanced answer into 3 peppy, practical sound bites. Because, she said, this is what the media wants and my audience needs. When our session was over, I walked out of her office, called my mom, and sobbed into the phone. I'm not cut out for this work. My voice is all wrong. I don't speak like I'm supposed to. A few months later, I was walking through Greenwich Village towards what felt like my death, but was actually my very first book reading. Clutched in my sweaty palms were 30 pages of carefully outlined points, tips, and techniques my media trainer had given me so I could appear like a successful speaker and author, and convince my audience that I had this whole spirituality thing in the Prada bag. But as I stepped onto the curb in front of Barnes & Noble, I suddenly felt like I did on that revelatory night back in graduate school. Softly overcome by something that was me and almost so much more than me. My soul. Without skipping a step, I turned to the right and gracefully dropped every page of my media trainer's notes into a garbage can. For the next hour, in front of 100 people, I didn't perform, conceal, or try to match external models of successful speaking. I admitted my stage fright. I allowed my fears to be fully present, and I delivered the divine goods through my so-called human faults. Yes, my voice almost shattered the 15-foot windows. I almost projectile vomited on the first row. I'm pretty sure some of the kind audience wanted to take me out with a tranquilizer gun, but that previously suppressed part of me, my soul, finally made her public debut. While I continued the awkward learning lesson of publicly unleashing my soul's voice through book readings, talks, interviews, and group facilitation, I still hadn't learned how to unleash my soul's voice professionally through the written word. The universe set me up for that lesson soon enough. A few years after the Red Book was published, I signed a large contract for my second book and immediately came down with a severe case of writer's block. The kind of writer's block that didn't come from my mind's lack of ideas, but rather from my soul's lack of support. While I recognized that my writing issues were a reflection of and a catalyst for unleashing my soul's voice, trying to unleash my soul's voice under a legally bound contract was like living in a pressure cooker. After an excruciatingly unproductive year, I stopped fighting the block and started writing about it. Like red rose petals breaking through cement, words started to fall onto the page, and the pages grew, and soon there was what looked like a memoir. Writing my story as honestly as possible brought my soul's voice back to life, which brought me back to life. And often, late at night, the keyboard would fade away, and it felt like I was writing in that red journal back in graduate school. But here's an important thing to remember about unleashing your soul's voice publicly. Not everybody likes it. When I finally turned in a rough draft to my publisher, they were not pleased. My editor told me my manuscript was too dramatic, too emotional, too self-indulgent. Labels pinned on every female memoirist, by the way. Not to mention strange, difficult to relate to, and completely unmarketable. My confused editor asked me, why reveal all these weak and unflattering parts of yourself? Don't you want people to admire you, emulate you, see you as a successful spiritual teacher and a strong feminine leader they should follow? She explained that the publisher contracted me because they thought I was going to hit it big in the mainstream spiritual arena. But my manuscript did not reflect their hopes or support their plans for me at all. She topped off our awesome meeting by telling me I didn't have the literary chops to write a memoir, and I had 45 days to write the self-help book I was originally contracted to write, or else I would have to break contract, lose my livelihood, and enter formidable legal battles. My editor's response was a lot like I had written out every single one of my inner critic's beliefs about this book and then had my editor read them out loud to me. In other words, my editor was the perfect projection of my own self-doubt, that my soul's voice is wrong, weird, and unwanted by this world. And by writing what my soul wanted me to write, instead of what the publishers, sales teams, and marketing experts believe women want, I would be failing women and the divine feminine. And herein lies the crazy-making contradiction. As upset as I was about my editor's orders to ditch my soul book, part of me also felt relieved. the thought of actually publishing my soul book filled me with a host of stomach-heaving fears. Fears of ruining my professional reputation, sinking my spiritual status, disappointing my audience, crippling my academic credentials. Fears of failure, fears of rejection, fears of making myself this vulnerable. Fears of what others will think, fears of being seen as a flake, fears of upsetting my friends and family, fears of canceling my membership in the Cool Girl Entrepreneurial Club, although honestly, I never officially joined that club. Fears of not being able to pay my rent, fears of puncturing my purpose, missing my mission, and screwing everything up. And then there were the super suffocating, skin-flaming, mega motherfucker fears. Fears of being killed for speaking my truth. Point is, at this time in my life, my passionate desire to unleash my soul's voice through this book was being choked by both logical and illogical fears of what might happen if my soul book actually went public. The night before, I had to inform my publisher if I would write the self-help book they wanted me to write, or break contract and continue writing my soul book. I was at my wit's end, and I earnestly prayed for help. And that's when something interesting happened. I experienced what I can only describe as a kind of inner slideshow of scenes from what appeared to be and felt like my past lives. In one scene, I was chained to a post in the middle of a bonfire, surrounded by an angry crowd, throwing my books into the flames. My unwelcomed words and I burned to ash together. In another scene, my sister priestesses and I were being raped and tortured to death in our temple for publicly teaching about the divine feminine. There was a scene from another lifetime in which I was at a pulpit in a church preaching esoteric ideas about the sovereignty of the soul. I knew when I left the pulpit I would be killed. I knew, but I still spoke. In another, I was purposely kept alive, forced to watch my children, my lover, and my community be killed because I voiced my truth. As I witnessed this ongoing slideshow, tears poured and grace arrived. I understood on a level unreachable before that night why it was so difficult for me to publicly voice my soul in this lifetime. Self-forgiveness, self-acceptance, self-compassion crashed through my previously critical, comparative mind. My human heart broke open, and my present-day struggles fell in. Now I realize that after what I just shared, some of you may be wondering if you're at the right event. I can't answer that for you, but if that bit of soul sloshing just wiped out your woo-woo meter, let me reframe this reality. You don't have to be a mystic or a physicist to know that although our journeys are unique, we are inherently interdependent, intimately connected by an invisible web of consciousness. So, in this context, what happens to a woman in Iraq today happens on some level to every single one of us. And this interdependence stretches through time. Through this lens, you could say that the slideshow I recalled wasn't just my story. It was all of our stories. It was a snapshot of how the feminine voice, more often than not, has been treated on this planet and is still being treated in some places, all of which affects us in a variety of intensely real ways. However, I want to be clear. I'm not sharing this so we can revel in victimhood or rant against those who were or are still against us, nor to unify women through their pain bodies. I'm sharing this to honor my soul and your soul and the incredibly courageous path of the feminine soul. After that slideshow, I broke a contract with my publisher, dealt with the enormous consequences, finished writing my soul book, and eventually found a wonderful publisher. Because I realized that what was actually more painful and more terrifying than anything I've experienced in my past and anything that could happen in my future was not voicing my soul now, not living the truth of who I am out loud and on purpose and in full service to life. One of the many things that slideshow reminded me was that success is measured quite differently through our soul's eyes. While unleashing our soul's voice, the results of this aren't always immediate or apparent. Each time we do so, even an itty-bitty bumpy bit, we widen the pathway for other women to voice their souls. I know we couldn't be expressing what it is we're expressing here at this event if it wasn't for the brave women who have dared to voice their souls before us. Like Maya Angelou, Eve Ensler, Anais Nin, Audre Lorde, Rosa Parks, Teresa of Avila, and currently the young Malala Yousafzai, who says that being shot by the Taliban after she spoke out for girls' education in Pakistan only made her stronger. The reality is we're a highly privileged group of women who are not dealing with dire circumstances or horrendous ramifications for voicing our souls, which makes our responsibility to do so that much greater. So when you hit an external or internal barricade around unleashing your soul's voice, remember, you're not facing it alone. There's a sisterhood surrounding you, supporting you, and encouraging you to keep speaking, not just for yourself, but for all women, past, present, and future. In other words, see the barricade as a rite of passage, an initiation by fear into love, an invitation to don your superheroine cape and serve this planet the way your soul originally intended. I'm also sharing this part of my story as a fiery reminder to respect and have relentless reverence for your and every woman's unique soul voice. Because our soul's voice communicates our entire universal journey. It's a symphony of sounds from all our lifetimes, conducted by that which is beyond time. Therefore, it reveals both our wisdom and our wounds, our strength and our vulnerability, our light and our dark, our fear and our love, our perfection and our imperfection, our humanity and our divinity. Our soul's voice is where every aspect of us comes together like a cymbal clash of truth, transmitting the paradoxical power of the feminine. a power that most of us have forgotten or been forbidden to embody, a power that those who have made themselves in charge have tried to contain and control, a power, if unleashed, will change this entire planet. From the boardroom to the classroom, the supermarket to the neighborhood park, the courtroom to a coaching call, when you unleash your soul's voice publicly, this is the cosmic currency your words carry. And believe me, they have an impact. And this is why you need to protect your soul's voice like a lioness protects her cubs. Besides being a direct dose of the divine feminine and a force of liberation for all women, your soul's voice is a transmission only you can give. It's an integral piece of humanity's puzzle. It's your sacramental signature in the book of life. It's your muddy fingerprint pressed lovingly into the earth. Bottom note, this planet desperately needs your soul's distinct tone in order to harmonize. So please, don't change your soul's voice in order to sound like someone else or to fit an external template. Your soul's voice doesn't try to impress or improve, convince or convert, sell or save, manipulate or maneuver, get more clients, or collect more names for your newsletter list. Your soul's voice is the antithesis of marketing copy. It has no hidden agenda. Your soul doesn't worry about being liked or pretty or stylish or spiritual or financially lucrative or grammatically correct or marketable or a bestseller or Oprah-worthy or understandable by the masses. It's got way bigger game. Unleashing divine truth and love on this planet through and as a woman's body. One last reminder. In this fast-paced, results-oriented, hyper-ambitious, here's how to be a bigger, better you capitalistic culture, we often forget that soul wounds take time to heal, that letting her rip happens layer by layer, and no one is an expert in this organic field. Unleashing your soul's voice cannot be coached or taught, forced or faked. Unleashing your soul's voice is not a bullet-pointed goal for a weekend workshop, a tempting tagline for a teleclass, a well-packaged promise on a website. It's an ever-evolving sacred practice, a never-ending act of surrender, a total spiritual ass-kicking, and a lifelong journey for most of us. And we all need support during this messy, magnificent, natural process. So no matter what comes tumbling out, a fireball or a feather, a peculiar dance or an animalistic moan, a shy smile or slippery tears, slam poetry or a personal story mixed with some freaky shit, we should nod with respect and say, hell yes, sister, bring it on. Bring it on. Ladies, if I can do this, you can do this. And what I mean by this is not standing on a stage at a fancy event. It's about making your entire life into your soul's stage. It's about remembering that the real spotlight comes from nothing outside of you and everything inside of you. It comes from the very core of your being, which is directly connected to the very core of this universe. And when you speak from this place. It guides you and everyone near you home. To close, I'm going to read an excerpt from an ancient Gnostic text called The Thunder, Perfect Mind, which was written in the 2nd century in the voice of the divine feminine. It's from this text that the title and the inspiration of today's talk derived. Please close your eyes. Place one hand on your heart and one hand on your belly. And let her ancient, paradoxical words remind you what true feminine power is and who you are an embodiment of. Audience, hear me. Do not let your voice or your hearing hate me. Do not ignore me, any place, any time. Be careful. Do not ignore me. For I am the first and the last. I am she who is honored and she who is mocked. I am humiliation and pride. I am security and I am fear. I am without shame and I am ashamed. I am she who is timid and I am safe in a comfortable place. Whenever you hide yourself, I myself will appear. Do not be afraid of my power. I am the silence never found, and I am the voice with countless sounds. I am the 1,000 guises of the word. I am the speaking of my name. I am she they call truth and they call violation. I am the power of the powers. I shall shut my mouth among those whose mouths are shut, and then I will show up and speak. Receive me with understanding and heartache. I am a mute that does not speak, and my words are endless. Hear me in tenderness, learn from me in roughness. I am she who shouts out, and I am thrown down on the ground. I am she who shouts out, and it is I who listens. Hear me, audience, and learn from my words. I am what everyone can hear, and no one can say. I am the name of the sound, and the sound of the name. I am she who exists in all fears and trembling boldness. Do not be afraid of my power. Emerging women, do not be afraid of your power. Let your voice transmit all of who you are. In other words, dare to speak goddess, not English. Life longs to hear you. Thank you.